and welcome. Thank you for popping in. If you're new to the channel and you find this content helpful, subscribe, click that notification bell, and you'll be notified of the next video release. You can head to my website, consultingninja.tech. I have a whole bunch of free stuff, a whole bunch of free resources that you can check out that are super helpful. You can always comment below with anything you'd like me to cover. Today is going to be pretty sweet. So I'm doing Tic Tac Toe, but I'm doing it using Vue instead of React. As consultant, I'm constantly having to learn new tech stacks. The way that consulting works is, if you're not familiar, is you work a contract. When it's over, you work the next contract. Now, the next company might have the same tech stack. Not likely, in my own experience, been doing this for many years, and it's always something different. So it's good to be able to jump in, dive into something new, and pick it up quickly. Since I was not familiar with Vue, I wanted to go ahead and do that, just because you never know. The next project I take, they might have Vue in their front end. And I've actually found this to be super enjoyable. So we're going to jump in, we're going to make this tic-tac-toe game just like with React, but with Vue. And I think you guys are going to like this. I certainly found it to be an enjoyable development experience, so hopefully you do as well. Without further ado, let's get right to it. I am going to be using Vite to power this. Now, if you're not familiar with Vite, I do have a video on it. You can check that out. I will post that in the top right-hand corner of your screen. It's super fast, and it works with many frameworks, so I like to use it. It also has built-in Typescript support. Tic-tac-toe. So for that and many other reasons, it solves many problems. I do highly recommend checking it out if you have not. So now we need to go in there. Oops, cd tic-tac-toe npm install. Get all of our wonderful dependencies installed there. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code to modify my source code, so let's go there. And let's just talk a little bit about some differences in Vue. So Vue uses its own extension format called Vue. The main.ts file, you can see this is in React. This is where you'd see the document.getElementById, and this is doing the same thing, except for this is the Vue version. So I'm essentially under the hood. That's exactly what's happening here, though. Just using this special function that Vue has. If you look in the index.html file, you can see here's our div with the ID of app. So I mean, you're looking at it's doing the same thing. In our app.vue, here is where things start to differ, and there's benefits and drawbacks to this format. So for anyone that's relatively new to frameworks, this actually, I could see this being super helpful, because you have 3 different sections. You have a script section, which is saying this is where my JavaScript is going to live. You have your Vue. This is what's going to be rendered. So essentially the whole Vue framework is modeled around that whole controller Vue model. So there's controlling code, and then there's a Vue that's rendered based off of that controlling code. I do talk about that in other videos, particularly the TypeScript video. So if you've not seen that video, you can check that out as well. I can post a link in the top right-hand corner for that video as well. So we have those 2 sections. We have our controlling code and our Vue, and then we also have an optional style area. This has scoped styling, so this would be relevant only to these components inside your Vue here. This reminds me of like Material UI's styled components. So I like this setup. It makes sense. It's intuitive. However, I will point out that this probably would get to be too large of files rather quickly. So you'd have to probably spend a little bit extra time breaking things down into smaller components. But otherwise makes a lot of good sense. We're not going to use this. We can delete this out. And we're not going to use any of that. So delete that. We could change this to, we're going to call this game. And change this to game. and we're not going to be passing this anything. And save that. Now let's go look at our component. Let's just delete this, but I wanted to show you guys in their template you have your prop that you're passing in. In the child that is accepting that, this is what that looks like. There's this little define props, and you inside of here you just say what it is, and then you use it like this. So you just brackets, and then what the prop is. So pretty straightforward. We're not going to use this file. We don't need to. I guess you know what? Let's do that. Let's just use this, and let's just delete everything out of here. So let's go ahead and delete this style. We're not going to use that. We are not going to use any of this. We're not going to be passing any props, and we don't have a count. So we have we have a skeleton, and we're also not going to call this hello world. We're going to call it game. So let's rename it, and let's just put something in here like game, and we'll fire up our development server, and you could type npm run dev, which is listed in the package.json. All that's doing is underneath the hood is running Vite, so you can type Vite just as easily. And let's go take a look, and there is our game. So sweet, everything is working. Hopefully you guys are still with me and no problems so far. If you are, hit that thumbs up, comment below so far what you think of Vue, and let's keep going. So the way that state management works with Vue is it's primarily all done using references. So that's what this import ref, we're going to be using that. If you have state that would need to be shared between multiple components, you can create what's called a store. Those are pretty cool as well. I've played around with those a little bit, and I probably will save that for another video because I'm actually finding this really fun to play around with Vue. All right, so let's define the state that we need for this game. We need let's just call this ticks, and we're going to fire up a ref, and the ref is going to be an object with essentially like battleship coordinates, right? AA, AB, AC, and what we're going to do here is put the player inside of there if it's selected. So BA, BB, BC, and CA, CB, CC. And then we need a player, so we need to keep track of whose turn it is. And it's going to start as player 1. And then we need to keep track of the status of the game. And so we'll create a piece of state called, so we have ticks, which is the object with 9 locations, 9 coordinates, if you will. And then we have a player, that's just a string, it says 1, and then a game over that we're initializing to start as an empty string. Okay. Now we are going to need a few other things. We're going to need a way to reset these, right? Once we play the game, we need a way to reset it. So let's make our reset handle reset, and this is just going to be a function that manually sets these things back. So ticks.value is assigned, and let's just copy this value so we don't have to type that all out again. And then a player.value, and we're just reset that to 1. And a game over.value, and we'll just reset that to the empty string. So there we have a way to reset the game once it's over. Now we need to check the status of the game, right? As players are clicking the coordinates and making those changes, playing the game, we need to constantly be checking the status. Did someone win? Did player 1 win? Did player 2 win? Are all the squares selected but there's no winner? So let's create a check status function. Check status. And this is going to need to check a few things. So the first thing Let's go ahead and grab our object and check to see if everything, well, we're going to get how many things are still empty, have not been selected at all. So let's call this const check all empties. And what we're going to do here is something kind of cool. We're going to go in and select object.entries, and this just returns key value pairs from our object, so pretty sweet. And we need to tell it what object we're doing that on, and that's tics.value. And then we're going to take those and do a flat map on them. And we're doing a flat map because we don't want arrays of arrays. So this would be returning an array, and each item in the array would be an array with the current key and current value for each entry. And we don't want an array of arrays, we just want one array with all of the items in it. So that's why we're doing a flat map. And then we're going to take an entry, so this would be one set of coordinates with the current value. And I do need to wrap this because it's a parameter. Each of these are a little bit different. I've done a video on like filter, but I haven't done the maps yet. So as soon as I do, I will link a video to those as well. And this is going to be entry. And now what you do here is you just decide which piece of that. So if I hover over this, you'll see what an entry is here is, like I said, it is one set of these. So it's an array, the first element being a string. That string would be the coordinates, right? The object, the property name, and the second one is the value. So all we want is the value. We don't care what the key is right now because we're just wanting to know how many of these are still empty. Okay, once we have all of those, we're just going to keep chaining stuff together, so bear with me. Once we have all of those values, we want to filter based off of how many are empty. So let's do entry again, and entry equals, we want triple equals the empty string. So how many are still empty? Now we could keep going, and really we're going to need to check the length of that. So what we have here is a string array, and this is going to be contain one element for every empty that it finds. Okay. Now what we're going to do with that is we need to run this check. Whoops, if check all empties dot length, whoops, dot length is equal to 0, then we're going to set game over dot value to no winner. So this is going to check to see if all of these are full. Then that means every square has been selected, and there are no more empties. So let's set not winner. I've thought about whether it really makes a difference to check this first or last. I'm not really sure it does. I don't believe it does, because what we're going to do next is then check for every possible winning solution, because we're not returning out of this. We're doing this check, and if this is true, it will set not winner. So let's say that every square is selected, but the very last square that's selected creates a winning result. Well, this is going to come in here, and it is going to set that to no winner, but then when we do our subsequent check, it's just going to overwrite it. So now we need to check our coordinates, our battleship coordinates. And if you're not familiar with the rules of Tic Tac Toe, it would be any horizontal or vertical line. If all three of those values match, that person is the winner. Otherwise, there's two diagonals. If either diagonal contains all three of the same values, then that person is the winner. So we have a few things to check. Essentially, if all of these are the same value, if all of these are the same value, and if all these. So let's just start with those. So if tics.value.aa, and we also want to let's just check to make sure it's not an empty string. So if there's something there, and we can just copy this, and it's equal to B, and it's also equal to C. Whoops, C. Then we want to set game over.value to equal player.value. So there, we've done one. All right, thank you for bearing with me there. We've got them all typed in. So now we have our check. So now every time someone clicks, we're going to need to check the status of the game again. Let's create our handle click. And this is going to take a key, and it's going to be one of these. It's going to be AA, AB, AC, etc. Okay, I didn't think you'd want to watch all that, so I just cut it out. So what we have here is, this is just some TypeScript, and we're just saying, being specific in what we're doing here. The parameter that we're sending this handle click function is just the key, and the key is going to be one of these, AA, AB, and so we're telling TypeScript that, so that TypeScript doesn't complain to us. And now inside of here, we want to do some checks. So if gameover.value, if the game is over, then let's bail out. We're not doing anything. The game's over. If the square has already been selected, we also want to bail out. And so what we do here is tics.value, and then here we're going to pass in that key. So it's going to look in the object at that key, and if that is not equal to the empty string, right, means it's already been selected by player 1 or player 2. We also want to bail out. Now if neither of those are true, then we need to set the value. So if neither of those are true, then tics.value subkey, and we want to assign that to the current player. So player.value. Then we need to check the status of our game now that we've updated with that new click. And if it's game over again, if it's now game over again, this is, so if we don't put this, it's always going to finish out. And so like React is always one render behind, and so you have to kind of, do extra steps with a use effect to trigger some code to be checking again. With Vue, it does a really good job of that, but you actually kind of run into like the opposite thing. So this is going to automatically update unless we tell it to stop, because the game is now over. So we have to check twice. If it's over, stop letting people click, and then as soon as we update it, let's check again to bail out of the last part, and that is player.value. We need to update with set the player to be the next player in line. Player.value equals player.value, and if that is player 1, then we want to set it to player 2, otherwise player 1. Okay, so we have our handle click. This is going to update every time someone clicks a square. Now, one last thing, and we're nearly done. Let's make a function to handle our messaging. So let's call this handle message, because we are going to be displaying a bunch of different text depending on the current status of everything. Now this really is only going to take 3 lines, so this is not a lot, but we are doing a lot in here. So if game over dot value is equal to no winner, then we want to return the message all ticks. Let's just say all ticks are tacked. And let's add a K. All ticks are tacked, but no winner. And then if gameover.value is equal to 1 or 2, that means that one of them won. So then we can just return, and what we're going to return, let's use a string literal so that we can do both in one shot. And we want to say player $ bracket, do player.value wins. So if player 1 or player 2 has won, let's return player, and then rather than having to do this in two separate ones, by using this checking for both and then returning the current value, which is going to be correct because we bail out here, we can display the message for both players in one shot. And if that is not the case, then we are just updating with the next iteration on turns. So let's return another string literal. It is player, and then here $. And I guess you guys choose, if you want to say player X, you'd have to add this there too. So you can do player 1, player 2, or X's and O's. Here I'm going to do X's and O's. Here it's just going to be player 1, player 2, but you decide what you want to do and do it accordingly. So player.value equal to 1, and we're just going to put that ternary in there. And if it is, then we're going to give it X. Otherwise, O, and then apostrophe S. Oops. Outside apostrophe S. Turn. Now here in our template, this is what we're rendering out. Let's get rid of this. Let's make an H2, and this is going to be a bracket. This is our handle message function that we're running. So that's going to update our messaging. And then a button. Oops. Button. And this is going to say reset. But what I'm going to show you here is, so how Vue does conditional rendering, I think is also kind of cool. And you just inside as a parameter on the button, you put this v-if, and then in the quotes the condition that you are looking for, and that would be game over, not equal to the empty string. And you'll notice that I'm not saying .value here. This is something interesting. I haven't dug into the documentation deep enough to know why in your script you are referencing it as a reference, and so you need to say .value. Inside of your template area, you just put the actual name. Not really sure what that's about, so if you know, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will explain it in a future video when I've had a chance to dive into the documentation. Otherwise, let's go ahead and do our click handler, and what those look like in Vue is @click, and then we put what we're doing here, and this is the handle reset. And I got to put the E. Okay, so now we just need our game board, which is going to be a div, and inside of that div, another div. To make it styled correctly, let's give this one a class equal to tile-container. And for rendering out lists in Vue, that looks like this. It's inside of your tag. You do a v4 because we're doing a for, and what we're doing is value and key in ticks. So this is how you do like a for in loop in Vue. And now this is going to render out a whole list of divs for every key value pair inside of our object. Okay, pretty cool. I actually like it. And then we need our click handler, so at click, and that's going to be our handle click, and we need to pass in the key because our handle click is expecting that key to know which one to check. And we need a class equal to tiles because this is an actual a child tile. And then the last thing that we need to do here is inside of this div add some double brackets again, and this is how you render out stuff. So value, if the value is 1, let's give them an X. Otherwise, if value is 2, we want to give an O, and otherwise an empty string. So we need to check for both separately. So this is a nested ternary. Hopefully it's not confusing, but this is just saying if the value is 1, then an X. Otherwise, if the value is 2, give an O. Otherwise, empty string. So let's go ahead and save that. Now we have one last thing to do, and that is just to quickly throw in the styles for tile container and tiles. And inside of our style.css, anywhere in here, doesn't matter. Let's go put that here. Let's just say tiles-container, and I forgot the dot to signify a class. And this is going to be really basic styling, nothing crazy. We just want to, let's do a margin of auto, display of grid, grid template columns, auto, 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 and then let's throw some padding, 2em, margin 2em, and we're all done with that one. And then dot tiles, tiles, and all we need to do here is let's do let's force a width on these to make this consistent, and a height, and a background color of FFF white, text color of 242424. I like that off black. Throw in a little more padding, 1em, and a border, 2 pixels solid, and more of that off black. And give that a save. Slight bump with the class name there, but once that's fixed, you will see we have our game. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this as much as I did. If you did, please like and subscribe, comment below with anything else you'd like me to cover, and enjoy the rest of your day.